Mark, another interesting chart you could have put up there, I think, is the percentage of population of this valley, which is here in this room this morning. As you may have noticed, it's a pretty quiet time of year. This is an outstanding attendance this morning. So once again, thank you to all of you for coming. So let me introduce my panel. First, I'll introduce Ann Allott. It's obvious which one she is up here. She's the managing partner at Allott Immigration Law Firm. She was a deputy district attorney in Colorado for 10 years. If her name is familiar to you, it could be that for many years in succession, 5280 magazine names her as one of Denver's top lawyers. Not just top immigration lawyers, but top lawyers. Last March, she delivered a talk that I wish I was at, entitled, "What to Do When ICE Comes Calling." Don't all of us wish we were there? Anyway, Ann, thank you for coming up and being with us this morning. On my immediate left is Ali Noorani. Am I pronouncing that right? Close enough. Ali Noorani, I think. That's the second one I didn't have right. We're very fortunate to have with us today the executive director of the National Immigration Forum. When Warren puts a panel together, he doesn't mess around. The National Immigration Forum is based in Washington, D.C. Ali may also look familiar to you. It could be because he's been featured on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, and today you can add to your CV that you're featured on Grassroots TV in the Roaring Fork Valley. And finally, on my far left is Mark Shurtleff. I could be calling him General Shurtleff, but he says that Mark is just fine. He comes to us today from Salt Lake City. Mark was the Utah State Attorney General from 2001 to 2013. I read that he is the first Attorney General in the history of Utah to win election to a third term. There's probably a whole story there, but we don't have time for that. And as Attorney General, he led the formation of the Utah Compact. And the Colorado Compact, which you have on your tables, was inspired by the Utah Compact. Ann, we're going to start the first question with you.
Thank you. I hope my mic is on. Yes, it sounds like it is.
Great. Good mic check. So let's assume I'm a citizen of another country, 2013. If I want to emigrate to the United States, how does that process work under the current system?
Well, that's a good and very important question. And it requires that you usually come here on a temporary visa, and then you spend a lot of money to go through the Department of Labor to show that you are unique and that no U.S. worker readily wants your job. And then you get to file a document to show that you're qualified to hold the job that was advertised. And then you have to wait a long, long time to get a visa number to eventually get a green card for yourself. It's a long, difficult process.
Okay, and so to add on to that, let's say I am currently in this country, I'm currently working, but I'm undocumented. What does that process look like currently?
Hopeless. And there are a lot of them. There are probably, I think in Colorado, there are almost 1 million people who are working who are undocumented. And so there are quite a number of them. And we see them every day. They're very much part of our business and our whole economy. And that's where we really need to focus, is trying to help those people become documented so that they are in the system. I see them using Social Security numbers that they've made up. They pay taxes, they pay Social Security, they pay Medicare. I have a woman whose case I'm working on right now. She came here as a nurse about 25 years ago. She was legal for 3 years and couldn't get her visa extended, but she stayed anyway, and she's still a nurse. She was born in 1934, and she's still working. She's paid Social Security and Medicare for years. She cannot collect it because even though she has a Social Security number, it's one that's endorsed for temporary employment. We have hundreds of thousands of people who are in that situation. It's wrong that they don't pay taxes now. They do. And it's wrong that the Social Security Administration is not helping us deal with that.
Do you have any idea what that number is, what that adds up to?
I used to get that number every year under the Freedom of Information Act request, and then they stopped giving it to me. So I stick to New York Times reporter on them, and they gave it to the reporter once. And that was about 15 years ago, and we haven't heard the numbers since then. It's billions of dollars that have been paid in on incorrect Social Security numbers.
So there's a reason you're our first panelist. Can you just give us an executive summary of what the situation looks like right now, the immigration system?
Yeah, why do we need immigration reform? Well, it comes to mind, the first thing that I thought of when I was thinking about this subject was the beautiful book that I read about Steve Jobs, his biography. And Steve Jobs and Obama got to be very good friends. And there's a whole chapter about that friendship in the book, which is written by Walter Isaacson, who has something to do with this institute.
Passes through from time to time, yes.
Yeah. And anyway, there's a very nice conversation in there about how Obama and Jobs were talking about immigration issues. And finally, Obama says, you know, Steve, you're employing 400,000 people outside the U.S. I want those jobs here. And he said, I need, to do that, I need 35,000 degreed engineers to supervise them here. Give me those and I'll give you the jobs here. And Obama said, I can't do that. And that's right. Under the current immigration system, that's the way it works. So we have these huge dilemmas in the immigration system, and I've rather broken down the problems into three sections. First of all, employer-employee relationships and the problems there. I write a book on employer sanctions every day. I'm dealing with employer sanctions cases in my office. ICE tells my client, you just gave us 300 I-9s and 100 of those people are undocumented. And you have to discharge them now. And so they discharge them, and guess what? They go across the street and work with the competitors. And they don't arrest them, and they don't put them away, and they don't get rid of them. They just make the employer who trained them and made them incredibly vital employees go somewhere else. That's one of the big problems. And there are more with employment-based cases, but we have also the shortage of H's. We just got through our H-1B session. Every year, the government gets 65,000, I should say, H-1B visas. H-1B visa is a professional person in a professional degreed person in a professional job with a professional salary. We get 65,000 of those, and they come available October 1st, the beginning of the new government year, and we file April 1st. On April 1st this year, we got 185,000 requests for the 65,000 visas. I was lucky. I got 100% approval notice. My agents got there at 8:45 on Monday morning because I was very careful about the way I mailed them, and I think that helped. But it's ridiculous. If government and if businesses need 185,000 foreign workers to do these jobs, why don't we let them come? They created other jobs for U.S. workers. So we have businesses who are really struggling with this entire issue, and I could talk about that for the rest of the day. But there are two other areas that are important to focus on as well, and that is the individuals who are here. As you say, those who are undocumented, what can we do with them? The most tragic group, of course, are the children who came through no fault of their own, who are here, who we take through the high school education. That is because of a very important case called Pyler versus Doe. To me, it is the most important Supreme Court case that was ever written. It's Pyler versus Doe. Google it, read it. It is one of the greatest statements I've ever read by the U.S. Supreme Court. My dear friend Peter Williamson litigated that case. It started in Texas. Texas decided they were only going to educate U.S. citizens, and they were going to charge everybody else to go to school. And if they had green cards, they were going to charge them. If they were temporary visitors, legal or illegal, they were going to charge them or not educate them at all. And so he litigated that to the Texas Supreme Court and lost, and took it on his own to the U.S. Supreme Court, and he won. And the Supreme Court very wisely said, we are not going to let any child in the United States be uneducated. We are going to educate all kids to the 12th grade. And oh, by the way, Congress, get off your duff and fix this issue. And that was 21 years ago. And June 15th last year, Obama finally announced, used his discretion to begin to give these kids who came under the age of 15, who are under the age of 30 now, 2 years work authorization. It's been one of the most moving things that's happened, personally moving things that happened in my private practice of immigration law, that these kids who are, we've invested a lot of education in are finally beginning to find themselves being able to come out of the shadow and work. They still feel very insecure, but at least we're not throwing them away. And France, by the way, did exactly the opposite. They chose not to educate undocumented kids in France for a long time now. And they're wild animals. It's unbelievable what has happened in France by not educating a group of people. These are very serious issues about which we have to fix. And it's been waiting to be fixed for a long time. Basically, we have, for individuals, we have non-immigrant visas, and we have immigrant visas. The non-immigrant visas, I call it the alphabet soup of visas. A's for a diplomat, B's for a visitor, R's for a religious minister. Some are for working and some are for many different things. And that's initially how people come here. But then, of course, they try to get green cards. Since 1952, we've been giving away 1 million green cards a year. The number has not changed. But guess what? Our population's changed quite a bit since 1952. It's like the lady of green cards wore a size 10 dress and now she needs a size 20. And she only still has a size 10 and it's really ugly. And what happens is 750,000 of those visas go to family-based. And so if you're from the Philippines and you sponsor your brother and you filed that petition in '87, you will be getting a green card for your brother in May of 2013. It's outrageous. That the way the numbers, I brought some visa charts if you want to look at them afterwards to see the bad news in these charts. You wait years for your kids to come and you wait, it's ridiculous. The whole family-based system is totally broken. And then the employment-based, we get 180,000 employment-based visas for all different kinds of people. And the problem with the employment-based is, so just last week I finished a case for a very high-level engineer. He had a master's degree and was in the second preface, and he's from India. He had to wait a long time, too. He gets one of those 180, and his wife and 3 children get 4 more. So out of the 180,000 for employers, we're really only getting about 70,000 real engineers, or the STEM people, or what all the great professions that we really need. That should be a fat visa number, and that should be fat and include the immediate family. And then perhaps we would be doing much better, and I'm pleased to see that some of the bill is providing for that kind of thing. So not only do we have problems with individuals and we have problems with employment-based issues, we also have problems with the government agencies that are in charge of doing what they're doing. My biggest concern is, of course, the removal court. For many years, I started practicing immigration law 2 years after the Act of 1972. We had one immigration judge and he wasn't very busy. Now we have 7, and the backlog in their courts is 7 years. They don't have nearly the manpower to deal with the people who are in the system. And that system is completely broken. They have cases in the system that shouldn't really be there. If you get arrested and put in removal and you have never committed a serious criminal offense, and you've been here for 7 years and you have your wife and your kids here, and it's compelling and compassionate for you to stay, you can file for cancellation of removal and get a green card. The judges love that because it's their only chance to give anybody a green card. But we have thousands of those cases stuck in the system, and they ought to take them out and move them somewhere else so they can be adjudicated fairly and quickly instead of waiting 7 years for a benefit. So that part is really broken. And then the other part is really broken is the Social Security Administration. The Social Security Administration will not tell what they know. They have held the point over and over and over again. We're not an enforcement agency. We're just taking in money and paying some of it out. And so they know that a person's social security number, somebody's reporting wages with that name, address, that I should say name, date of birth, and social security number in 5 states on the same day. Looks to me like somebody sold their name, address, and social security number. And they know it, and they're taking in all the money from that, and they don't have to account for it. So there's a lot of places where the system is broken, but the Social Security Administration really needs cleaned up, and so do the government agencies that are trying very hard to deal with all these problems.
Well, thank you for setting the stage for us. The format of this is going to be that I'm going to ask leading questions, but initial questions of each of the 3 of these, and I'm going to protect time at the end for questions from all of you, even those of you who can't see me around the corner down there. So we won't take questions while they're speaking. If you have a burning question, write it down, make a note of it, because we will be coming back to you at the end of this panel. And Ali, I'm going to turn to you now and ask, we're all getting the impression this is a huge job, immigration reform. Wouldn't we be better off just to take it one step at a time? Isn't the fact that we're trying to do comprehensive just going to overwhelm us? And shouldn't we just do this piecemeal?
Well, this is, it runs right into a policy question, but also more importantly, a political question. From a policy perspective, the range of issues that Ann just laid out, they can't not be addressed piece by piece. You fix one piece, you leave another, and you fix the high-tech piece of the economic, the high-tech part of the economy, but our farmers don't have the workers they need. So from a policy perspective, it's an integrated economy. So we have to treat we have to create an immigration solution that acts in an integrated way. So that's the policy challenge. But the political challenge, I think, is even greater. There are many members of Congress, frankly, who would love to just be able to say, we're in support of border enforcement and high-skill visas. And that's our definition of immigration reform. That means 11 million undocumented immigrants who are working hard, contributing to our communities and our economy, they're out in the cold. And, it's taken us, 20 plus years to get to this point where the politics of reform are lining up in a way where Republicans are saying, yes, I want to get behind comprehensive reform. Democrats are saying, I want to get behind comprehensive reform. Why are we asking for less? Why would we want to ask for less? We need, a comprehensive solution, a common sense comprehensive solution from a perspective of our economy, but then also, there's a political moment here. We have to take advantage of it.
Let's talk about urgency for a moment, because that plays into this also. Do we have the luxury of 5 years to fix this?
We didn't have a luxury of 5 years to fix this 5 years ago. As I touched on earlier when I was introducing Mark, we have a real window here where we have legislation that's been crafted by the Gang of Eight, which is a very solid plan. It's a very important step forward. And then on the House side, you have at least 2 different tracks starting to take place, where you have a House Gang of Eight that's bipartisan, as well as the House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte from Virginia, who's starting to introduce pieces of legislation into his committee. So the window, in our opinion, is really between now and then September, October, because you can only sustain this kind of energy so long until, frankly, Washington gets distracted by the next shiny light.
They don't do that, do they? Of course not. Okay, Mark. We've referred several times to the Utah Compact. I've heard an urban myth that your neighbors to the south, Arizona, began to take immigration reform into their own hands, and that didn't appeal to you up in Utah. Can you either verify or dispel that urban myth I've heard?
Thanks, Steve. I will, but let me just first say thank you to you as well and Warren putting this together for the Resort Association and the Institute. It's great to see my former colleague, Attorney General John Suthers. We worked together side by side for 8 years. You need to know Coloradans, he's not only a great law enforcement public safety official here, but he's a leader nationally. He's very, very highly respected. It's good to see you again, General Suthers. I also, if I could, since I'm going to be talking a little bit about law enforcement, and immigration reform. I do see at least one uniformed officer here in the audience today. Tonight in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder will be speaking at a candlelight vigil kicking off. This is National Law Enforcement Memorial Week. We'll be adding a highway patrol trooper, a Utah highway patrol trooper, to that national memorial this week. And just wanted to thank our officers for their service. And if you happen on your way back to Denver get pulled over, just be really nice and thank them for their thank them for their service, if you would, because they put their lives at risk. Thank you, officer. All right, so yeah, well, first of all, let me just say this. Obviously, because of the lack of the federal government, primarily Congress, fixing this problem, the impact of immigration and of undocumented workers and so forth is at the local level. That's where we feel it's local and state level. And so with frustration over the lack of progress and really resolving this problem, states started to say, well, maybe we need to take care of the problem. There was a lot of misinformation out there as far as the economics involved, as far as the public safety issues, and because of this hysteria that kind of grew up, primarily from within my own Republican Party, and the Tea Party movement started getting involved in this, that yes, Arizona, being a border state, felt like they had to do something. We felt in Utah, as soon as they passed 1070, which was this tough, run them out, enforcement only, aggressive law, we immediately in law enforcement believed that that would be very harmful to public safety. Let me just explain why. For the last 30, 40 years, we all understand community-oriented policing. For hundreds of years, law enforcement message was stay in your house and lock your door, we'll protect you. And we learned a long time ago that that is not the best way to protect people. You need to get into the communities, get to know the people, everybody in your community, establish relationships of trust and working together. And we immediately knew that if you made state and local law enforcement officers, sheriff's deputies and police officers and officers working for the Attorney General's office, ICE agents, that the ability to work with them and to have the trust of the entire community would be eroded, and that would harm public safety. In Utah, a few years prior to this, we had created because we knew that there are clearly what we call criminal aliens, or those who are in our communities in an undocumented status, but they're here to commit crime. We know who the bad guys are, the drug dealers and the human traffickers and so forth. And we formed a strike force to just focus on that aspect of it. That's where we ought to be using our resources, on the criminal. Our primary, obviously, support and 90% of our confidential informants were undocumented residents, because they live amongst these folks, they know them, they want to work with law enforcement, they have to trust law enforcement. We immediately saw that trust would evaporate, and that would hurt public safety overall. And so we said, we've got to say no to 1070, say no to enforcement only. But we also know there was this growing movement, and there were Republicans in Utah who said, we got to do exactly what they did. Look, it's politically popular. Look what it did for Jan Brewer, made her governor, and so forth. We have to do this too. And there was a copycat bill, exactly word for word, and we in law enforcement said, well, and only us, but then business communities came forward and started saying this is going to hurt the economy. And evangelical, and not just evangelical, but all religions, Jews and Catholics and Mormons came together and said, this is going to hurt the fabric of our communities. It's going to hurt families. So why don't we all get together and try and do something? Just say no is not going to work. People they want something done. So we thought we ought to encourage our red state, 2/3 Republican legislature, to actually do something different, unique, reject enforcement only, and try and craft some type of pragmatic, we call it in law enforcement. The president uses the word common sense, same thing. We deal with what is happening on the ground, and we have to try and resolve the problem. What will really work? And we came up with a guest worker program and so forth. But to lead that, we felt, since we don't draft legislation, we had to come together as a community, these groups I mentioned, to join with the other advocates, immigration lawyers, and other people who are migrant workers, supporters, who look at these communities and have fought their whole lives for reform. Get all together and come together with a set of principles we call the Utah Compact. Hopefully thinking that would then spur, number one, our Republican legislature to do some comprehensive, pragmatic, and yes, even compassionate reform. And it did. It worked, because we told them we'll support you. Now, when these Republicans, just in concluding, these brave Republican legislators step forward, of course, the next time they come up for election, they were challenged, once again, by those within the right wing of our party. And they were going to take them out. They were sworn they were all going to take all these guys out, from the speaker to the governor to all those who supported this reform. Come around a full year, and in our convention and our primary, because of the support, not just of those three groups, Bibles, Badges, and Business, and others, but the people of Utah got behind this, and all of those brave legislators were reelected. That's an important point for people to understand. Those from the right who challenged them, who thought they could run for higher office and succeed, they lost. It's a message that we now want to those Republicans, primarily for me in Congress, conservatives, to understand this is a conservative principle. It's a uniquely American way to resolve things, and hopefully this will give them the courage to do the right thing as well.
Here's a question for all three of you. I'll ask, Ali, I'll ask you to start. We have 11 million, and I asked you, should I use the term unauthorized? Should I use the term, underdocumented? You said, no, just call it what it is. We have 11 million undocumented persons in our country. How did we get here? What can we learn from how we got here?
Well, we got here because we have an immigration system that doesn't meet the needs of our economy or our families. And what has happened over the course of time is that individuals have been, frankly, they've been put in a situation where they have not had the opportunity to go through a legal immigration system. Without a legal immigration system, somebody has had, 40% of the undocumented have had to overstay a visa, whether it's a work visa or a tourist visa. The balance have had to enter without inspection. And those numbers will kind of change here and there. But the fact is that without a legal immigration system, people have had no process to go through. And that's what's frankly gotten us in this situation, because as many people will say, we have two signs on our border. One says no trespassing, and the other says help wanted. And if you're coming from another country where you see the land of opportunity and freedom that is America, and you see those two signs and you want to make a better life for your family, you're going to make a decision. But the decision that people would want to make is, okay, how do I go through a legal process to enter the United States of America? And the fact is we don't have that. So one of the best parts of the legislation is the fact that they have crafted what we hope, when this bill is signed into law, will be a workable immigration system for the future, so that we're not back in this situation, so that 10 years later we're not having this conversation again. Rather, we're having a conversation of, okay, how do we make sure that this fast-changing workforce continues to move our country forward?
Do you want to add to that, Ann? How did we get to this point?
Yeah, we sure got there. When I started practicing immigration law in 1974, one of my first cases was a fellow from China who had gotten on to be a crewman on a ship because he wanted to jump the ship in San Francisco to be with his wife, Rona, who was here in Denver having a baby. And he made it. And it took 2 weeks for them to find him and put him in jail to get him ready to be deported back to China. And I got involved, and I got him out to jail, and I took him to Canada and got him a green card, where he has lived happily ever after in the United States of America. Fast forward to the Iranian crisis, when the Iranians took hostages, Jimmy Carter was president, and he said, how many Iranian students do we have here? INS, and they said, we don't have a clue. They didn't keep those kind of numbers. And it was sort of a realization that the business had grown immensely. We were having people coming from all over the world, much more than we ever had, but there was no computerization. There was no way of keeping track of all that. Fast forward to 9/11. After 9/11, we realized we knew who was coming in. We had no idea who was going out. Now we have computerization of that whole system. I know the minute they turned on the computer, taking in account when people were going out, because I had a lady who was coming to Denver to see her boyfriend on a visitor's visa. She'd come for 90 days, go home for 2 days, and come back for 90 more days. And all of a sudden, they asked her who she was going back to see, and she said, oh, her brother. And they said, oh, that's interesting. He's sick, she says. I have to take care of him. I've been traveling back and forth. Do you have your brother's cell phone number? Yes. Well, it was a boyfriend. It took me a year to get her back, and because she didn't get in. But that was the difference in the system. Finally, we have computerized the system. We have enormously good computer records of who's coming and going and who they are. If you've ever had a DUI in the United States of America and you want to go to Canada, you are not going. They do not let in any American who has any DUIs, and they have all our driving records, as we have all theirs. So we have a huge exchange of records worldwide. We really know who people are now and can find out these things much better. In the meantime, of course, the system has grown enormously. But I think because of the computerization, we are more than ready for a massive immigration reform.
Great. We're just about ready to go to questions, so if we can get the mics available for those. Mark, do you know much about the E-Verify system? Is it working?
You know, it can work. There are some problems with it. Here's the concern, I think, from the business perspective, and that is just as local law enforcement did not want to become federal officers, business owners are concerned about becoming the enforcement arm of the federal government when it comes to who can work for them. And the problem with that is because there are so many, as Ann pointed out, so many different classifications, and then to hold a business owner either criminally or substantial civil penalties involved if they do hire an undocumented worker, even though they've run through the system, they may have missed it, is not, I don't think, the best idea. Now, there are certain elements that have that. We do need, in this country, secure identification for those who are here. We need to know who they are, biometrics, and those are all included in this comprehensive immigration reform package, which we strongly support. And so I think that we can get behind those efforts.
I own a small business here in the Valley. When I'm about to hire somebody, can I actually go online and validate their Social Security number?
No. Well, you can, but you have to have a special program to do it. I use LexisNexis, and if you put in the name, date of birth, and Social Security number of a person in LexisNexis, you learn quite a lot about. There's quite a lot available any place they've registered, and it immediately also shows me that maybe 2 people are using that number or more. But there's no way to do it easily. You can do SSNVS, Social Security Number Verification System. You can go in and find out if that name, address, and phone number is assigned to that person. That doesn't mean that that's who's sitting in front of you.
So one thing I would just highlight around E-Verify, because it's a very large part of the debate, and you'll see a lot of talk about making sure that employers are verifying that their workforce is here legally. The fact is that E-Verify as a program, it's not 100% accurate, and we have concerns about privacy issues, but also the ability of people to appeal the results of E-Verify. But the bigger issue for E-Verify is that if it was implemented across the economy, now think about how many employers there are across the economy, tens of millions. Implemented across the economy without legalization of the 11 million, it is complete and unfettered chaos for employers, much less our economy. So when you're hearing about the issue of E-Verify, yes, it sounds like a great program. Yes, it sounds like it would hold employers accountable. But without, and this gets back to your original or earlier question, without a comprehensive fix to the system that, again, legalizes the 11 million and creates an immigration system for the future, E-Verify is really an incredible cost to the employers and to the economy. So it's just something to be aware of.
Do we have questions in the audience? Frida, will you wait for the mic and give us your name when you ask your question?
My name is Frida Wallison, and this perhaps, first of all, this has been a fantastic session, and thank you all for being here and talking with us and to us, I guess. But this question perhaps relates to the next session, so I apologize if it does. But, and you were talking about records and computerization. One of the aspects of what the Gang of Eight in the Senate has proposed is, I gather, to legalize the 11 million is to have those 11 million or whoever's working in that group pay back taxes. So this whole issue of has somebody paid taxes, How does somebody pay them? How do we ever even figure that out, that issue? Can you address that?
Well, I have read the bill, and they do allow people who have been paying under an incorrect Social Security number to put their earnings where they should be, when they get a good Social Security number. But I can't get anybody to have a green card now if they haven't paid their back taxes. And that's a general immigration rule now. You may not become a lawful permanent resident of the United States if you have found a way to get legal because you married a U.S. citizen or whatever, until you paid all the back taxes. That's a very bottom line fair rule.
Can I just maybe comment on something that, talking about pragmatic common sense responses. In Utah, we didn't start with our first reform by trying to create a guest worker program. The basis of that was these people are here, they're working, they're using sometimes stolen Social Security numbers, sometimes of our kids. They're getting paid under the table sometimes. They're being abused by their employers. So pragmatically, we thought, well, as long as they're here working, let's bring them out of the darkness. Let's make sure they do criminal background checks, know who we have, recognize them, let them pay taxes, let them participate. That's what we tried to do in Utah, and now that's a big part, obviously, of this Gang of Eight proposal. But we didn't start there. It goes all the way back to a decade ago when we, in law enforcement, knew that there are those in our communities who are undocumented, who are driving on our roads to get to work. And we felt like it was important, as long as they're going to be there, whether they have a license or not, they're going to drive. So pragmatically, let's give them a license initially, and then we changed it to what we call the driver's privilege card, so that they take a test and know our laws. Number two, they have a document, they have a ID that has their address on it and some identification. And then 80 to 85% of those who were given these licenses and then were driver privilege cards also had insurance. So it just made sense pragmatically to do that. Same thing with our kids in school. We try to tell our kids, we know there are lots of kids in school whose parents brought them here. We want them to succeed. We go into school in elementary school and say, stay away from gangs, stay away from drugs, learn English, stay in school, work hard. And then you can go and go on up, and if you graduate with your friends you're sitting next to from high school, you get to go and pay in-state tuition just like the kids sitting next to you your whole time in high school. That's a common sense approach. It gives kids hope and a chance. It turns them away from gangs who are telling them you can't ever succeed. So these kind of common sense approaches are what we're talking about. And it's what we need right now, and that's what I think this comprehensive reform offers.
We'll go way back this direction now.
Hi, excuse me, my name is Dave Johnson. I live in Carbondale. I want to know what's being done for the 12 million American-born citizens in this country who still can't find work. And who are being told in places like Carbondale and Glenwood, where the workers from a lot of the employers that are sitting in this room live, they go to apply for a job down in Carbondale or Glenwood, and they're being asked if they speak Spanish. You know what? That's wrong.
Thank you.
I had a recent experience with an employer where they had quite a few jobs open, and they got an auditorium full of people. It was a concrete business, and U.S. workers came, and the lady, HR lady said, okay, we're very glad so many people came to apply for these jobs today. These are basically $15 an hour jobs, and we're very glad to have you, and we're very glad to train you to do the jobs here. We hope we can hire many of you in this room. We have two things that we have to talk about. Number one, you have to have your own transportation because this is a remote location. So you have to show us that you can get to work every day. And 3 or 4 people left. And next she said, we will drug test today. And there were 10 people left.
Let me just also add this. Look, in Utah with our guest worker program, we made it very clear we want, obviously, American citizens doing the job. They should be, and you could only hire one of these undocumented workers in the guest worker status if you first were you had to prove to us that you had advertised and could not fill those jobs. And then you had to pay a competitive wage, not under the table, not something that an American worker won't work for, but a competitive wage. That's also a big part of what they're talking about for the reform for guest worker programs. The bottom line is yes, we have a problem with unemployment, absolutely. But it's a myth to say that these undocumented aliens are taking away those jobs. There are jobs that American citizens will not do, and we found that. Well, I'm sorry, sir. You can say baloney all you want. Let's look at the facts, because there's much of what is being done is based on misinformation. The facts are very clear. Since Arizona passed their law and other states started to pass similar laws, that their economies suffered substantially. In Georgia, for example, they could not get people to pick their onions. They said, well, that's fine. We'll just fill up a bus of prisoners, because they're in our custody anyway. We'll take them out there, and we'll make them pick onions. Those prisoners worked for half a day. It was too hard for them. They just sat down and said, no, what are you going to do? Put us in jail? The bottom line is, we know now economically it is substantiated that we need these migrant workers in this country, but any program should make sure that we first clearly protect the rights of citizens to work jobs if they want to have availability of those jobs, and to not be undercut as far as what is being paid. And that's what this reform will do. If we don't do the reform, this amnesty per se, it continues right now as it is. We have to try and change that so that there's fairness across the board for all those who want to work in this country. And that's why even labor has gotten behind in working with chambers of commerce and others, this whole concept of this comprehensive reform.
And I would just add that at this point in time, the status quo is only leading to one person winning. And that one person who's winning is the unscrupulous employer, the crooked employer. The unscrupulous employer who knows that they can hire somebody who's undocumented. They can pay that person lower wages.
Yeah.
They can make sure that person has no rights in the workplace. And therefore, that unscrupulous employer, that crooked employer, is making a greater profit. That immigrant worker is making less money. That native-born American worker working alongside him or her is making less money. And then that employer's competitor is losing as well. So for immigration reform, levels the playing field so that everybody is competing for the same job at the same wage. The status quo is not only leading to greater profits for the crooked employer, but it's costing taxpayers $18 billion a year to have in place the largest federal enforcement system that exists. So we can continue down the path of what we're doing now, spend $18 billion a year, not actually have the tax contributions of immigrant workers and their employers, who then would have to pay taxes, and then the crooked employer is the only one that wins, and everybody in this room loses.
I wish we could. This always happens when the conversation gets going. One of my main jobs as moderator is to make sure you all get the break you so richly deserve. We're going to come back after the break and continue this conversation. I will do my best to arrange for even more time for questions after the second panel. So thank you very much for being here.